So I asked you here to talk about innovation. You may know that we're having a lot of our engineers and geologists, our scientists, because they're trained in science, to talk about innovation, to come up with ideas. And the idea of the Innovation Fora is just to get people to spit ideas out. It's not to analyze the ideas, because analyzing can happen at any time, but we want to create this energy about just spitting them out. Part of our culture, to be very rich in ideas and to come forward to be like a Tesla or a Google or a Boeing, a company that makes its living off of being different and better in technology. So what I want to ask you about is what are your thoughts on innovation? How important is innovation to 7 generations? Anybody got something to say on that?
Sure, I think it's extremely important. If you don't push the boundaries, you're going to be lapped. People will go ahead of you, and you won't be there.
Yeah. What about the competition? How much of a factor is competition in innovation?
I think we're in a very saturated market, and I think there's a lot of companies out there that are looking to get ahead of everyone else.
Yeah.
And I think if we're not one of those companies, we're just not going to be a company anymore.
Yeah.
We got to be leaders in technology, to develop our technologies, to develop the industry. So we have to test technologies. Drilling, we've tested over 85 different technologies. And when we commercialize something, just like we do our development of our properties, we find a technology that works, we implement it through all our wells. We drill them that way.
So something that works on one well might be applicable to thousands.
Totally.
And
And then you continually tweak and get better and learn
And each time.
each time.
So if it makes $1,000 and there's 1,000 wells it applies to, that's $1 million worth of gain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think we are falling behind on testing technology compared to our neighbors in the area. What happened in 2012, 2013, we were differentiating by using newer stuff and also being a little bit more willing to take bigger risk. For example, comparing frac fluids we use like foam versus oil, Paramount use, we were way ahead of those guys, also working on drilling technologies to bring the cost per meter down.
Yeah. So Chris Felton, if we don't innovate, what could happen to us financially? What could happen?
It's important to remember that the industry that we're in is a commodity, and therefore, we don't get to set the price. So this is the difference between us and companies like Apple and others like that. They have a product, they get to set the price of that new widget that they're producing. We don't set the price for oil and natural gas. That's a globally driven price. So we in this industry, one of the only things that we can control is the costs, whether it's capital costs, operating costs, try and improve those efficiencies. And if we don't, others are going to pass us. If they get more efficient, their wells become economic, they pass us and become the lower cost operator. We're going to lose our access to capital. That could impede our ability to grow. That could impede our ability to attract capital. And financially, if you're not generating as much revenue and cash flow for every dollar that you're putting in the ground, you could ultimately have a deteriorating company over time where your balance sheet blows out and too much debt. It just becomes very difficult to operate under that environment.
Emile, you've looked at the business from two sides now, completions and drilling. So what do you think, from that perspective, with the two different sets of knowledge, is there things that can be done together to bring those two departments into joint projects?
Absolutely. I think whatever is done in drilling directly affects what completion does, and lots of completions needs have to be met by the drilling side. So we have been working together a lot lately to come up with new ideas and new innovations. One of them is, let's put a bigger casing in the ground so that when the completions guys are fracking, they can get their higher rates and potentially get more complexity in the rock and better production. So that's one of the ideas we're working together with them on. Another ideas are multilaterals as well. So that's in the works right now to get it to fine tune it. Other ideas also that, because I've seen the completion side that I can bring over to drilling, one of the ideas was, potentially using ceramic proppants and pump them down the drill pipe so that we can get better lubricity down with our pipe. So that's something we're already doing on the drilling side, but completions product would potentially be cheaper and better suitable for that aspect.
That's really neat. Brandon, you did a paper for the Society of Petroleum Engineers, and I was delighted to be your guest in the audience. Tell me, what's the next paper? What's the next thing you're going to work on?
I guess the next thing we're working on right now, we're just looking at different applications for proven technology. So as Lynn said, in some cases we're forced to reach out farther, and sometimes it's not necessarily picking up the newest shiny tool out there, but maybe looking at old proven tools that may have been redesigned and finding a new application for them. So for some instances, you can reach farther by drilling a better quality well bore, which means your laterals can get longer and the completions team is able to reach the toes of those wells easier if your trajectory's held better. And so sometimes it's just finding new uses for old tools that are readily available to you.
Now, the community, when we have discussions with politicians and community leaders and just general members of the community, they generally come up with about 4 different environmental challenges for us. Is there anything we can do with innovation to address those environmental concerns?
Well, I think on the waterfront, I mean, I know we're looking at, and completions probably can talk to this better than I can, but just moving away from using water to frack. That's certainly a step that is something that we can do. Right now with slick water fracks, we're using a lot of water, and naturally we want to reuse that water, but we all know the risk with that. When you move in saline water around the area, that has a lot of risk associated with it as well. So, but if we can move our fracks move that technology so we don't need to use water, that would be certainly an innovative step.
Yeah, yeah. And we aren't necessarily big emitters of greenhouse gases, but our product, when it's used, it generates greenhouse gases. So we're like every other industry, we have to reduce our greenhouse gas footprint, but it's not, I think there's a misperception that we cause the problem, and it's not the public and its use of our products that causes the problem. Anybody got any comments on that?
When we think about the environment and the needs for the public, we think about 2 things. The public wants reliable supplies, because if they don't have it, it's no good to them. And they want affordable supplies, because if they can't afford it, it's no good to them. And then they want it green or as environmentally friendly as possible. So as we think about all the things that we do to lower the cost, the ultimate cost ends up in their savings, because they pay for the products that we use. So every time we become more efficient economically, it's of an advantage to the consumer. If we go back several years, we can recall when gas prices were $6 to $8 US. Now they're hovering around 3. And that is a technological event. It has ramifications in what we pay to heat our homes, but it has ramifications in the cost of food, because the cost of natural gas goes into producing fertilizer, which is then used to grow food. So the entire formula involves us all. It involves consumers, and it involves how we operate. What we want to do is become a leader, in low cost and low carbon intensity. And that is what consumers and the people are asking for. And that's a service to stakeholders.
So it's kind of the alignment that Randy spoke of as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. All right, so there are lots of companies in the world that have become famous for innovation. Is there anybody think of a company that we should emulate, that we should try to be more like? Not necessarily in oil and gas, but in any aspect of technology. Anybody that really uses innovation to create value for their stakeholders. So what do you think about that? And what do you, I like Google as an example. What do you think about the need for innovation in terms of global competitiveness?
You look at a company like EOG, and EOG's been put out there as a leader in terms of innovation in the US and throughout North America. And I think I'm excited about what we have to offer in that regard. We have been testing technologies, much like EOG. We are doing a tech pilot, much like them, with microseismic and fiber optics. There's things that we can do to emulate EOG, who has really led the charge in terms of all sorts of innovations, whether it's geological or engineering or reservoir characterization. And I think some of their step changes in terms of completion designs have really led the way.
I think one thing that EOG does exceptionally well, I call it kind of the Moneyball concept. I'm not sure if you guys have read the book or seen the movie, but you know, it was essentially about how the Oakland A's would transform by really getting rigorous data analysis. And the thing that EOG's done well is they're empowering all of their staff by making that information available so that you know everybody can look at their desktop or something. They have a whole bunch of internally generated applications.
So we've been in business now for almost 10 years. Think forward 10 years. What's the technology that the business uses? Like, what's going to be different, do you think? Anybody?
I think you might start seeing some enhanced recoveries out of these tight gas reservoirs. I think that's going to be the larger push. Those EORs are, you know, going to be popping up everywhere, those enhanced recovery.
Good. Anybody else got a vision for 10 years out?
It's much more international, I think, than it ever has been. Whether it's competition with the US for natural gas markets internationally, or whether it's sharing technology internationally. We have been to Japan, we've talked to people there. We are looking at partnering with one of the research companies in Japan who sponsors companies that actually are users of our gas, natural gas through LNG. So I think the world's become a lot smaller in terms of the market that we work with and the technologies we work with. And I think we have to be part of that. I think we have to align ourselves internationally now.
Okay. Any other views?
I think talking about companies that we look at, it's not always, we always think of tech companies and oil and gas companies, but innovative ideas could be very simple. I was looking over the weekend, I read about Domino's Pizza, for example, which is a really good performing stock. One idea they had was they took a car and they made it a pizza mobile. They turned it into, they put ovens in it, they retrofitted it. They could fit up to 80 pizzas in it for big parties and things like that. So it's really good to think about innovation, but we need to think about it at all different levels and not just pure technology or pure efficiency, but it could be very simple ideas.